I'll give you a little overview about the research and promotion program. Is that good? Great. So like I said, this is the overall of the viewing of the cotton and research promotion program. So this is for Missouri and Arkansas. And like I said, I'm the Mid-South Regional Communications Manager. So it's kind of broke up into two different arms, I guess you would say. And the first part would be the cotton board. So that's the section that actually collects the assessments and actually gets the assessment from the growers, as well as administers programs overall to take your money and to put them into the actual research and things like that. And then also, and probably the funnest part of the job would be to communicate with the stakeholders as yourselves, the growers, just to let you know kind of where your money's going, kind of communicate back and forth between the Cotton Incorporated and the growers to kind of give you an overview of what's going on. And even if you have questions or maybe ideas that could kind of help your operation, we'd be glad to hear them and communicate that with Cotton Incorporated. So Cotton Incorporated is actually the research arm that carries out the research and also promotes the cotton demand and profitability for the consumers as well as the growers. So they kind of see the consumer trends and deal directly with some of the larger brands in the U.S. and across the nation to really kind of drive the demand for cotton and to make sure that your product is getting promoted and is also staying profitable at the same time. They also deal with the different mills and merchants, so all the way down to the retailer level, and they're the ones that really kind of take the assessment and put it to work as far as it goes as research and things like that. So we are governed by the USDA, so that kind of takes us away from all the actual policy and procedures. And there's many other cotton, I guess, organizations out there that really cover that policy and procedures. It kind of takes that away from Cotton Incorporated and the Cotton Board. So the Cotton Board is located in Memphis, Tennessee, and Cotton Incorporated is in Cary, North Carolina. So they also have other regional offices in Japan, New Mexico, or in Mexico City and New York. So that kind of covers the big areas to make sure that the cotton's getting promoted out there and the demand's continuing to drive. So so the Cotton Board, I guess, governs the per bale assessment fund the program of all upland cotton harvested and also has a per bale assessment. So I guess that's probably what you all are most familiar with is that producer assessment. And that makes up roughly 53%, whereas the importer makes up close to 47% of the overall budget and things like that. So we do pride ourselves in having a 99% compliance rate, which is one of the largest, if not the largest, in any other commodity in the U.S. So really take pride in just being able to work with the stakeholders and making sure that everybody's compliant when it comes to those assessments being passed down. So as I said, all those assessments do go into the budget, and Cotton Incorporated is going to be working on a decreased budget this year by about $8 million. So roughly an $80 million budget. Cotton Incorporated will be sending out for the research and marketing and promotion, things like that. That being able to collect those assessments and having a really good 99% compliance rate helps us be able to kind of keep this budget more in line and really kind of more consistent so that our research can kind of stay where it needs to be. The top programs or priorities for this year will be sustainability, product innovation, farm profitability, cottonseed value, and link contamination. So those are kind of the 5 main projects or things that we'll be looking for in 2021. So the Cotton Incorporated State Research. So this is kind of what we're looking at diving into today. So 7.5% of the assessments go back to these localized states to take that money and to invest it into these research programs. So I don't think that the assessment that you pay kind of just goes out maybe into other states or I guess different areas and things like that. Just feel confident that it is coming back locally to make sure that we get localized data and continue to support some of the state research. So the funding is determined by committees in each state. So that's where that localized kind of comes into play, to being able to have growers on the research and promotion board to make sure that it is staying localized. So like we said earlier, all the projects are managed by Cotton Incorporated Ag Research staff. So we'll hear from those here in just a little bit. So here, in case you want to reach out maybe to some of these state support members, or if you have any questions or have any ideas, here are some of the ones that are kind of, I guess, in your neck of the woods, so to say. And if you have any questions on any of those, feel free to reach out to them or myself. And I know we have a few of these on the call today, so really would like to extend a thanks to those taking the time out of their day. And for Mr. Steve, I guess, heading up the Arkansas State Support Committee. So I guess that wraps my portion of the presentation up. So here's my contact information. If I guess I should have thrown my phone number up there, but if you have any questions, feel free to reach out, email, and I can be glad to share that contact with you. And look forward to meeting in the future and getting to know everybody. So I believe we're going to move over to Ryan to start the committee projects.
Sure. Did that come up?
That's it.
All right, great. Appreciate everyone joining the call. I'm Ryan Kurtz. I direct the entomology research program for Cotton Incorporated, but I'm also the liaison for all the Mid-South state committees back to Cotton Incorporated. So I kind of coordinate between Cotton Incorporated and the state support committees, making sure the meetings get set up and proposals are solicited, and then taking what's funded by the committee back to Cotton Incorporated and making sure the contracts get in place with the different universities. So I'm going to go through an overview of the funding process very briefly, and then I'm going to go through each of the projects that are funded in each state for 2020 and give just a quick overview of the objectives and the significance, and then just one slide on some of the output or the impacts the projects are having. We're not going to have time to do a deep dive into the nuances of the research. We just want to give you a high-level overview of what's being funded. So in 2020, looking at the state support funding levels, for Arkansas, they were funded at $170,000, and Missouri was funded at $118,000. These are determined by an Olympic average of the previous 5 years of cotton production in each state. So it varies from year to year, but it's been in this range for the last few years. And this does not include the Cotton Incorporated Core program, which is essentially, as Grant mentioned, 7.5% of the money goes back to the states for allocation. There is a larger national pool of money that's dedicated to addressing regional and national problems in cotton production. That's the area of money that I and my counterparts manage at Cotton Incorporated. So how are the projects selected and just the general procedures? So both the Arkansas and Missouri state support committees work with the extension cotton specialists and just their knowledge of the issues in the state, and they set priorities for the cotton research and outreach and then put that forth to the university saying, these are our priorities. Then they solicit proposals from the university research scientists. Once the proposals come in, they're reviewed by Cotton Incorporated staff for scientific merit. Basically, what we do is just look at it is this work being done elsewhere? Has it already been done? Are there anything that could be improved to make this more impactful? Cotton Incorporated staff does not make the final funding decision. That is the sole discretion of the State Support Committee. So once we give a review of it, the projects then are reviewed at a committee meeting of the State Support Committee, and the committee votes on whether or not to fund these projects that are from the proposals that were submitted. So projects are funded annually. We have an annual funding cycle. We can only commit to 1 year, but we do recognize that most of this research is needed over multi-year. So in essence, once a project is started, it'll typically run for 2 or 3 years until its completion. In terms of accountability, we require quarterly and an annual final report for each project. I and my counterparts in the other disciplines review these reports just to make sure that progress is occurring as it should, and we pay invoices quarterly based on progress to date. So at the state support meetings, generally Arkansas has 2 meetings, one in the summer, usually in July, and then another in the winter, usually in January. Missouri typically has one in the summer. Recently, we've been having 2 meetings a year, another one in the winter. And at those meetings, updates are given in person from the research scientists on the accomplishments. So if you want to find more information about these particular projects, the quickest thing you can do is just Google Cotton Inc. State Support. That'll take you to the page. It'll show you all the projects that are being funded in your state. We also have a website called Cotton Cultivated, where a lot of the research that we're funding, both in core and state support, and even a lot of stuff that we're not funding, but is just generally valuable to the cotton growing community. If you Google Cotton Cultivated, it'll take you right there. Take a look at that. Also, if you have any questions related to either state's state support, you can email me at rkurtz@cottoninc.com. Jumping right into things, in 2020, these are the projects that were funded by the Arkansas State Support Committee. There were 5 projects funded, ranging from breeding with Fred Bourland, cotton research verification program with Bill Robertson, IPM and weeds with Tom Barber, root knot nematodes and target spot with Travis Foskey, and Gus Lorenz had a project on managing 2 and 3 gene BT cotton, as well as looking at managing non-BT cotton for caterpillar pests. So Fred Bourland is kind of an institution in cotton. He's been breeding cotton for longer than I've been alive. And he's got a really good research program that's getting a lot of value back to the state of Arkansas. The key objectives that he's looking at is to essentially evaluate and make changes to techniques employed by the University of Arkansas cotton breeding program to enhance the development of better cotton lines. He's looking at evaluating the available genotypes for resistance to multiple pests, including insects and diseases, as well as looking at improving fiber quality and enhancing agronomic traits. And he's looking at releasing these genotypes, making them available to other breeders, as well as releasing varieties from the program. And so basically, why this is important is maintaining a well-developed cotton breeding program is going to yield strong, well-adapted cultivars for Arkansas. The primary focus of this breeding is looking at new cotton germplasms that meet the production needs specific to Arkansas. And these new lines that are coming out are expressing various combinations of enhanced specific host plant resistance traits, as well as improved fiber quality and increased yields in Arkansas. So this is not just from this past year's general overview of the progress that has been made throughout his breeding efforts. He's released 8 cotton varieties. You can see the list here. 98 germplasm lines, 6 of which came out last year. And what they've also developed several new tools and criteria for selecting these lines and these varieties. The Q score, looking at how to measure and improve fiber quality, various host plant resistance traits, measuring the various impacts of these diseases and insects, and how well the plant can protect itself from those, looking at lowering bract and leaf trichome density, and they're in progress of looking at a yield component indices, kind of, it'll be very similar to that Q score for fiber quality. Jumping into the cotton research and verification program with Bill Robertson. Objectives of this program are to improve irrigation water use efficiency and soil health. They're going to also utilize the field print calculator to document differences in program fields and what they consider a farmer standard, and then expand the partnership with USDA and NRCS, ultimately leading to an effort to train the trainer to kind of help get all this information out to adopt new practices or to modify existing practices. And really why this is important is past research has shown that producers who are more efficient with their resources on farm are also more efficient with the money they spend on the crop. And so essentially they're producing more cotton per dollar spent. And looking into the future, we're trying to move this to improve efficiencies and conserve natural resources to keep the U.S. cotton industry sustainable and competitive. Some quick outcomes from this project. Across the 5-year study, looking to improve soil health, no-till with cover crop practices resulted in a 6% increase in lint yield and increased water use efficiency, requiring a little over 22% less water to produce a pound of cotton. It's also shown that irrigation water movement through the field is slower in no-till, mainly due to the increased water infiltration. Soil conservation or soil erosion was decreased almost 77% using no-till with the cover. And they're still needing additional research to further evaluate how lint yield and profitability are influenced by the interaction of seasonal rainfall and improved water infiltration, which can be an issue across the Mid-South or wet years. Weeds are a top of mind concern for everybody. It's been a problem we've been dealing with more and more each year. Tom Barber's project is looking at IPM programs for weed, given that recently discovering Palmer amaranth populations that are resistant up to 5 herbicide mode of action. They really need to look at diversifying management practices and not just relying on chemical control. So the objectives of Tom's project are looking at developing cost-effective weed management programs for Palmer amaranth, including economics and soil seed bank density. Then evaluating the combined impacts of a rye cover, deep tillage, and herbicide programs that overlay residual herbicides and a zero tolerance weed control program on the economics and management of pigweed and cotton. And then determining how often these practices should be conducted for best management of resistance in these weed populations. Some quick results of recent findings from the project. Use of one-time deep tillage reduced Palmer emergence by 73%. The zero tolerance program reduced in-season Palmer emergence by 63% in the first year. And while non-Dicamba based programs may cost less, utilizing Dicamba pre can be more profitable, particularly in dry years. And finally, effective cover crop usage appears to increase net returns in these trials. Moving to the best management practices for root knot nematodes and target spot. The objectives of this work were to work directly with farms to evaluate nematicides and fungicides for management of nematodes and target spot in cotton. So root knot nematode causes the most economic damage of any pathogen in cotton. It's endemic on coarse textured soils in Arkansas, in cotton and soybean. Target spot likewise occurs on soybean and cotton. While it's sporadic, it can be problematic. Growers frequently don't know whether to treat for it, and so trying to find out how to avoid losses without treatment, or hope they can. On the nematicide trial results, there were a couple of locations looking at susceptible and moderately susceptible cultivars to root knot nematode and reniform nematode. All nematodes except Evicta numerically suppressed root knot nematodes, while only BioST numerically suppressed reniform nematodes on both cultivars. Seed and soil applied nematicides provided greater numeric yield on root knot nematode versus the moderately resistant cultivar compared to the untreated check. These data support the benefit of nematicides when multiple species of cotton nematodes are present. Looking at the target spot trials, it was conducted at 3 locations, 2 fungicide treatments, 3 applications, fairly large blocks. What they found was there was a significant yield response with fungicides only at the Ashley County location, likely due to the severity of target spot in those counties. And you can see that in this box to the bottom right, or the treatments and the yield and the incidence of target spot in those trials. So lastly, looking at Gus Lorenz's project, evaluating 2 and 3 gene BT and non-BT cotton. This is looking at essentially your Bollgard 2s, your twin links, your compared to your twin link plus, wide strike 3, Bollgard 3, the newer products that contain VIP3A. They're really looking at determining the most effective method for management of bollworms and budworms across the cotton growing region in these 2 and 3 gene cotton varieties versus conventional cotton, evaluating the effectiveness of the new transgenics under typical grower conditions, and then looking at the economic benefits of these technologies to Arkansas cotton producers. So recently, these 3 gene cultivars, including BIP, have become available. The varieties provide great control, but in some certain circumstances, they've seen yield drag occurring. The question becomes, what's the most effective way to control bollworms? Should the grower use a high-yielding 2 gene variety and spray once or twice, or use a 3 gene variety and not spray? This project has just got started last year, but it's looking at answering some of these questions. Preliminarily, we don't have the economics wrapped up yet because the harvest data is still being analyzed. But the preliminary data indicates the 2 gene products such as Bollgard 2 and Twin Link took a lot of fruit damage this year if they weren't treated. Over a 3-week period, the 2 gene cottons averaged about 30% boll damage, while over the same time period, the 3 gene cotton averaged less than 5%. So looking forward, the 2021 Arkansas State Support funded projects, we still have the 5 projects that I just mentioned. They're going to continue again in 2021. And there were 3 additional projects chosen for funding at the winter meeting of the Arkansas State Support Committee for funding this current growing season. One on seed treatment efficacy in cotton seedling disease in Arkansas with Alejandro Rojas, looking at the impact of water quality on insecticide applications to cotton with Ben Thrash, and then a project with Bill Robertson looking at increasing profitability by reducing input costs and by improving soil health. So shifting over to the 2020 Missouri State Support funded projects, there were 3 projects funded by Gene Stevens looking at nutrient management across the board, looking at nitrogen, lime, potassium, sulfur, and Missouri cotton, and 2 projects with Jim Heiser at wheat, looking at weed control, post-emergence and overlapping residuals, and then another project looking at Dicamba and 2,4-D tank mixtures with an array with glyphosate and some graminicides. And I will have to mention that we don't have results in yet for the 3 projects with Gene Stevens. Unfortunately, he passed away a little over a week ago. So we're still waiting on results from that, but we're given plenty of time. We'll get the results in, clearly not the highest priority at this point. But we do have results from Jim Heiser's project that I'll go through in more detail. So jumping right in, Jim Heiser's project on post-emerge products with an overlapping residual. The objectives of this project really were to compare the utility of using days from planting, comparing that to weed size for the timing of the application of the second pre-emergence plus post-emergence herbicide treatment. Weed resistance has eroded the efficacy of many post-emergence herbicides, such that overlapping treatments of herbicides with foliar and tool activity are recommended following the at-time or the at-plant pre-emergence treatment. It's difficult to perfectly time applications on the second treatment because environmental conditions influence both the herbicide activity and weed emergence. So this research is really looking at evaluating the efficacy of timing the second pre-emergence treatment on days from planting versus weed size. Some quick results from the first bit of research on this study. They've had 2 years so far, and both years indicate that you should plan to apply the first post plus residual around 21 days after planting. It'd be slightly earlier with the weak pre-program and slightly longer with the stronger pre-program. Yields were not hurt by late season reductions in weed control from applying posts too early, but control of these weeds can reduce competition in subsequent years. Yields in weed control were reduced if the first post plus residual was delayed much past 21 days after planting, or if palmer was 2 inches in height. Jim Heiser's other project is looking at tank mixtures with Dicamba and 2,4-D. The objectives of this project were to determine the extent of antagonism, if any, in tank mixing mixtures of Dicamba and 2,4-D with glyphosate or these annual graminicides and the effect on palmer. So tank mixtures are an important tool for efficient herbicide application. Adoption of new herbicide resistant crops such as Enlist and Extend Flex rely on the use of herbicides, which are generally only effective on broadleaf weeds such as palmer. Grass control in these systems is largely required to use a graminicide for post-emergence control. Historic knowledge and literature suggests that antagonism can and should be expected when Dicamba, 2,4-D, or other broadleaf herbicides are applied in a tank mix with these graminicides. So looking at some of the results from this research project, palmer control in most tank mix combinations with a synthetic auxin with glyphosate, a graminicide, or both were not antagonized by the addition of the graminicide. He actually saw a slight increase in control, except in the case of a glyphosate tank mix with either Assure or Select Max. Grass control was very good when a treatment did not include the synthetic auxins. However, all tank mixtures that included a synthetic auxin reduced observed grass control to some degree. His general impressions from this study is that the slight increase in palmer control probably doesn't justify the reduction in grass control observed from these tank mixtures. So Gene Stevens has 3 trials that were funded in 2020. They were all related to nutrient management. The first is looking at determining the optimum fraction of ESN to include with the full amount of nitrogen fertilizer required to produce high-yielding cotton in Missouri. Urea is subject to losses from surface volatilization and leaching. ESN is a controlled release nitrogen source, so it may be possible and capable of supplying in continuously throughout the season. So you would, in that case, you would eliminate the need for additional applications because all of the nitrogen could be applied at one time while still providing sufficient nitrogen during the period of high demand from the crop. And what Gene was trying to do is do field calibrations to determine if he could figure out the optimum fraction of ESN that might be included in the full amount required for high yielding cotton. So results from that are still pending, but once they're out, the results will be supplied to the State Support Committee. Got another project on improving precision lime and potassium, refining liming recommendations for soils where high levels of soluble manganese and aluminum occur at low pH, and determining the response to potassium on these soils as well. So why is this important? Liming is one of the most beneficial practices for plant nutrition, but sharing costs of liming is often contested between renters and landlords. So they need better data to demonstrate the benefit of lime on these contemporary varieties and to refine our understanding of the response to lime on soils varying in aluminum and manganese content. The last project with Gene was on sulfur fertilization on cotton. The primary objective of this study is to determine the response of cotton to broadcast and foliar sulfur fertilization on the silty loam and sandy loam soils. Why is this important? Main secondary macronutrients are magnesium, sulfur, and calcium. Sulfur is important because it's used by cotton to make amino acids, and amino acids are then used to manufacture enzymes and proteins. So ultimately, this leads, about 3% of the plant tissue is composed of sulfur, similar to nitrogen. So sulfur affects chlorophyll production and the greenness of leaves, and cotton plants can't produce enzymes and proteins without both of these nitrogen and sulfur. When cotton roots uptake nitrogen, a healthy plant assimilates it by converting it to amino acids. Missouri research much earlier, around 2003, showed that sulfur deficient plants, this process is inhibited, allowing nitrates to build up in leaf petioles because there's not enough sulfur to make the amino acids. And essentially cotton leaves turn yellow, and despite having adequate nitrogen fertilization. So this work is trying to move that forward and determine what steps we might need to move forward. These 3 projects with Gene Stevens are 2 of the projects were approved for funding again in 2021 by the Missouri State Support Committee. They're essentially, given Gene's retirement and passing, it's to be determined on who's going to manage these projects. We also have another 2 projects. One is the continuation from Jim Heiser on the Dicamba and the 2,4-D tank mixes, and then a new project looking at the potential for cotton injury from glyphosate applications with an insecticide or PGRs following a simulated cloudiness interval. We have 2 other new projects, one with Earl Voorhees at USDA on soil health, and then one with the University of Missouri with John Travelos looking at weather tools to bring better, there's a weather station there at the Portageville Research Station or nearby, just to bring more accurate and localized weather information to growers very quickly. So again, I just want to reiterate, you can have access, there's more information to the projects that are funded by the state support program. The quickest way to reach it is just to Google Cotton Inc. State Support. If you like using QR codes, you can scan this one right here on the screen. And then there's a lot more information that extends well past the state support program, includes core research funded, as well as stuff at universities and other sources that we're not even funding, but we've tried to collate them on the Cotton Cultivated website to give you a one-stop shopping place for the latest cotton research information to help you manage production on your farm. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to any questions. We have Bill Robertson here, the cotton extension agronomist with the University of Arkansas. So anything related to the procedurally to these, I'm happy to take. If you've got specific questions about crop management in Arkansas, Bill's probably your best guy for that.
Thanks, Ryan. If there's any questions, feel free to unmute and go ahead and ask those for Ryan or Bill.
Ryan, this is Doug Rushing.